regulation and oversight is one area that's been discussed, and I know that when I worked at the Commerce Department, we kept asking the Japanese government to please implement independent regulators. And we kept explaining that it's not going to make things worse, it's actually going to make things better, because if you need an organization to take responsibility, then that is the organization that will take responsibility, and you don't have so much finger pointing. But it was very difficult for them to embrace that concept at the time. It appears that maybe they are starting to embrace it now. And my sense was that there's been some talk about at least consolidating the nuclear regulatory groups under one. I don't know if it'll actually happen. There's been talk of that, but it hasn't come from within the government. It's actually been coming from groups outside the government. And if they were able to actually consolidate those nuclear entities in MEX, MEDI, and the Prime Minister's office, I think it'll probably take a very long time to figure that out, because each of those agencies has their own ties to those regulators. So it's very hard to figure out where to even put an agency if you were to combine them. But it's one countermeasure that's an option for them. So the true challenge to that, though, is that the current government is really trying to make efforts to regain public trust. But in doing so, they are making announcements about energy security and keeping reactors online. And then they're also simultaneously making announcements about risk by asking for inspections. So by doing that, they've now made the public concerned that the reactors shouldn't stay open because they're also supposed to be inspected. The private sector is upset because they're being told to shut the reactors down. Oh no, wait, turn them back on, and we're going to inspect them. And then the same thing with the central and local government relationships. The central government is, saying you need the reactors. We don't want you to have rolling blackouts, so let's turn the reactors back on. But we need to inspect them. So trying to balance these two different views of risk is making it very difficult for the government to actually regain the trust and also accomplish something. And I think so you have this jumble of energy security risks, nuclear safety risks, and then the credibility of the government and industry that I just discussed, because all of it is sort of coming out at once. That you're having the energy security, which was the top pillar, it was the primary thing to avoid risk on, has now become, the nuclear element of that has now become the primary energy insecurity and the primary reason for environmental degradation, because you have nuclear power that was supposed to resolve energy security problems, was supposed to resolve environmental protection problems, just in terms of the Kyoto Protocol and climate change. And now you have nuclear power causing rolling blackouts because the reactors had to be taken offline, and you have nuclear power causing, from the view of the public, this is not it's not a statement of fact. It's the way the public is viewing this is you had a program, the government had a program that was supposed to make energy security a reality, and it was supposed to make environmental protection a reality, and now that same choice that was made in terms of nuclear power has caused safety problems, environmental problems, and security problems. So all of that has led to this government and industry credibility problem. And if you throw the new technologies versus old technologies mix in there, no one really understands what to do with all of that. So I think it's created a very confusing time for countermeasures. But just hit one. There you go. Thank you. But what they're moving towards is this reflection. So take a step back. We need to rethink our policy. Whether or not they're actually rethinking the policy, I don't know. But if you at least say you're rethinking the policy, you've already regained a little bit of trust. Because I think if they had said we are continuing with our nuclear program, and we need it because of energy security, at a time when they're having rolling blackouts because they've had to shut down 2/3 of the reactors, or they were offline already, it just wouldn't have worked, because the public's view of nuclear power, I think, has been very integral to the success of the program. If the government and the industry had not been able to convince the public that this was something that was okay, I think they would have had a lot more opposition and potentially a lot more media attention than they have. So the reflection element, whether or not it results in an actual revamping of the plan, is important. And then transparency, I think the Japanese government is now learning is needed, because, and actually the US government's learning that as well, because without explaining the direction that they like to go, but also explaining what really contributed to these problems, it's very difficult for any of these groups to galvanize around any kind of plan. And then finally, the technology. They need to explain, and I think have started to try to explain, and actually some international organizations are also explaining, the difference between the old technologies and the new technologies, and the fact that the technologies that are failing and have failed are not the reactors that are being built now, and they're not the reactors that were planned to be built in the future. A lot of those reactors have apparently included, like the safety feature I mentioned with the water, included engineering solutions to the challenges that were faced by Fukushima Daiichi. The one last thing I was going to say, which will hopefully be a transition, is that the power of media in framing all of these risks remains really important to the links between all of these different relationships that I was discussing. And those relationships and the risk perceptions are integral to any kind of changes to Japan's energy policy process. So I'm really happy that we have somebody to talk about media now. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Mikiko Sugiura. I'm a freelance scholar at Columbia University of civil engineering and engineering mechanics. Let me just correct the institution, the names of my institutions was also just civil engineering mechanics, just civil engineering and engineering mechanics. So my professor will be upset to see that. And I hope my mascara is not taken out because the videos that Dr. Ishiwari showed just made me so emotional. So I was upset and back. So my background is actually social science, although I belong to the engineering right now. And I have worked as assistant professor at the University of Tokyo and actually agriculture department. And after that, I came to the United States, and 2 years have already passed. And we'll be back at the beginning of September this year to Japan. And yes, my original academic field is water management, agriculture, irrigation management, and Japanese assistance. So I'm really appreciate my understanding that media coverage is not my academic field, but I believe that sharing the experience as one of the Japanese who has stayed in the United States and experienced the events of earthquake, and just to hear and to listen to the news. So then we circulate this photographs, and please just make sure that just let me back at the end of my presentation is that my friends she lives in my neighborhood, and she's Japanese. Her father suffered from an earthquake, and just took a photo. Maybe it's overlapped with the photos that Dr. Ishiwari took in his field. So just for your reference. And then there's a seat in the start. So first of all, I will express my condolence to all the people who are suffering from this illustration of the Great East Japan earthquake. So I'm honored to be here and join the meeting as one of the Japanese who experienced the shock of East Japan's earthquake, not in Japan but in abroad, through various coverage. So today's title of my presentation is Empirical Study of a Difference in the Media Coverage of the Great Japan Earthquake. So I start. In the media coverage of the East and Japan earthquake, we had various but not plenty facts available from limited news sources, especially the period between the March 11th and the middle of the April, when the Sendai airport started to refunction as a hub airport for recovery. The news of the earthquake and the radioactive contamination, they were not available enough. So it was natural that the isolated area was destroyed, and lifelines and highly risky in terms of radiation had limited access, which was not blamed actually, that there was some competition for people abroad to find which act would be the fact, and wavered over choosing between the Japanese coverage and the United States one. For example, the risk of nuclear meltdown was pointed out soon after the 11th in CNN by many captors such as Anderson Cooper. And then other people, while it was May 15th, the Japanese official authority in TEPCO finally admitted that Fukushima nuclear power reactors meltdown after the earthquake. So, and then furthermore, the series of videos which show the outer walls explosions was the shock, while a Japanese TV showed the still pictures of a burned down and a suited cover plant from the distance, which is the act. Monitoring data by satellite, the third example, which available from March 22nd on USJI, Department of Energy blog page, was one of my reliable data for me and abroad to recognize where would be high risk in the East Japan, which just turned me. And this is the page of Department of Energy in Greece. No, just, yes. And I just cut and paste the data from March 22nd to April 15th, and it is available. Furthermore, that you can see the data is really focused on the areas and the nuclear plant. And it's quite interesting that the area is almost the same area that the Japanese government announced it would be evacuated area after that. Well, actually, the two governments cooperated together, and they got very excellent data from that. But it is quite interesting for me too that the data is very available, very much available from one person actually through internet, just after the earthquake actually. Could you go back to the, yes, thank you. And yes, this data was one was very level one, and the monitoring data which were gathered by Japanese authorities was actually existed, such as Ministry of the Environment, Fisheries and Agency, Defense Agency, Ministry of Education, Culture, Sports, Science, and Technology. So we have a lot of data, but we're not legally actually, it's not legally actually, but not gathered attention at the moment. So on the other hand, it is a lot kind of negative, but U.S. coverage was straightforward. In other words, too straightforward to make people guess. Before Japan was chartered with destroyed facilities and fully contaminated, but it's not true. Please. So the difference of media coverage in appearance varies from the way of spotting information to the emphatic points. Not only in the case of TV channels, I didn't distinguish the media coverage, TV and newspapers, and earthquake and tsunami. So I think I thought 10 minutes is not enough for me to distinguish all of them. So just let me exclude that. So the TV channel, not only in the case of TV channels, visual effects were much used with satellite pictures and videos. Except some papers media, they focus on the destroyed facilities and devastated people. One of the interesting points which were pointed out in the group interviews I implemented on June 8th in Connecticut was the stress on